This is in Phil Studies, and by Ernest Sosa, Experimental Philosophy and Philosophical Intuition. Ernest Sosa is a pretty big name, I think, so whatever. We'll find out if there's any good. And as always, feel free to comment along the way. We'll find out what, if anything, gets said in this paper. It's getting hot in here. Gotta turn my fan on. And this is on experimental philosophy, and I don't know if you can see, but this is from 2006. This is a long time ago now, in terms of experimental philosophy. Alright, so this is moved on a lot, quite a bit. But anyway, we'll find out, and if you're around at the end, you get to review the paper, and, it'll be recorded, and we'll have a review of this. Our topic is experimental philosophy as a naturalistic movement and its bearing on the value of intuitions in philosophy. I explore first how the movement might bear on philosophy more generally and how it might amount to something novel and promising. Then I turn to one accomplishment repeatedly claimed for it already, namely the discrediting of armchair intuitions as used in philosophy. Okay, so I remember we read a paper by John Simmons out of Kansas, and he's this guy, I quite like him, he's from my alma mater, but like he was giving experimental philosophy a lot of crap, but more recently. So it's like, does it really do this or not? I don't know, because like I said, there's like 15, 20 years between, not 20 years, this is 2006, but it's like a good 15 years or something between like, different criticisms I've read of experimental philosophy. All right. Experimental philosophy bears on traditional philosophy in at least two ways. It puts in question what is or is not believed intuitively by people generally, and it challenges the truth of beliefs that are generally held, once traditionally important in philosophy. Each challenge is based on certain experimental results. How might such experimental results bear on philosophical issues? Here's an example. Traditional skepticism relies crucially on the idea that for all we can really tell, life is but a dream. Whether one enjoys waking life or an extended dream, one has the very same stream of consciousness regardless, so how could one possibly tell the difference? This depends on the conception of dreams as something like hallucinations. However, we might discover that dreams are not quite like that. Perhaps to dream is much more like imagining than hallucinating. If so, how might this bear on the traditional skeptical problematic? Even if it is part of the common sense that in dreams we have conscious experiences intrinsically just like those of waking life, an experimentally based approach might show that common sense is just wrong in a way that bears crucially on perennial problematic of philosophy, that of radical skepticism. All right, so basically, could we discover that dreams are somehow not what we thought they were? And so there's no question that, we know when we are not dreaming, because dreams are not the sort of things we can be confused about. Maybe all of a sudden we're going to discover that, we are never confused. Never confused. Yeah, somehow. Mining the sciences is not in itself novel, of course. Philosophers have been doing that for a very long time with striking results. Just think of how 20th century physics bears on the philosophy of space and time, or split brain phenomena on issues of personal identity, to take just two examples. Perhaps the novelty is rather that experimental philosophers do not so much borrow from the scientists as they become scientists. This they do by designing and running experiments aimed to throw light on philosophically interesting issues. So, is this just claiming that experimental philosophers are just sociologists? That's all we are. We're finding out what people actually say and act like they're doing when they're talking about philosophy. So they're just doing the sociology of philosophy? Is that just basically what Sosa is saying here? That this is just, sociology? And if philosophers are ill-equipped to probe the brain in the ways of neuroscientists, it is easy enough to broaden the movement's self-conception to include interdisciplinary work, provided neuroscientists care enough about such issues with philosophical import, as no doubt some already do. Indeed, many experimental philosophers would already define the movement in this interdisciplinary way. And is that even a problem? If we have a little bit more sociology and philosophy, that's probably a good thing. In any case, most of the actual work so far done in experimental philosophy has involved social psychology. Yeah, this seems like easy easy money over here. Like, do things that you can discuss in social psychology that also have overlap with philosophy. Some of the best known work has involved surveys designed to probe and to question people's intuitions on various philosophical issues. Anne, what's up, Anne? Anne, how you doing? Or not quite, lol, it sounds to me like a description of the movie Waking Life. Yeah, see, this is the thing. It's gonna be not exactly that stuff, but there we go. Viper's got the shout out. So thank you, Vipers, for the shout out. Let's see, I probably have the other one back too. So we can do the, I like the other one actually a lot better because it makes it one click. And yeah. Lurkin, yeah, what are you cooking? What's for dinner? So yeah, again, if you are not following in, you click the little heart at the top of your chat and then you can be following in. There you go. But philosophy and sociology are super related. Yeah, so I think this is like nipping at the corners, like at the edge where things overlap over there. So it's like, can you actually do that? So, oh man, what I just did. Dagnabbit me. I was scratching my leg and I hit a scab and now I'm probably bleeding again. Awesome. Okay. Some of the best known work has involved surveys designed to probe and to question people's intuitions on various philosophical issues. So the novelty might involve the methodologically self-conscious pursuit of such an approach. Find yourself a streamer welcomes you like, I do, Ann? Damn right. Although, I was really like, what was it? You know what's nice? I was in Shane's chat yesterday, and we raided over to Cryomara, and I was lurking in Cryomara already, but I had been there before Shane was streaming. And then, like, Cryomara said something about me, and, like, Shane was like, Noah's amazing. And, oh, Noger's amazing, he said. And I was like, oh, so sweet. So I put butt emotes in chat because I'm a butt. But, like, I was like, yeah. It was very nice. You're going to try another little experiment. Iris says, I think a lot of philosophers, especially ones who deal with formal issues, think they can divorce their studies from what people actually do. They hope that they can talk about what they should do or how they should think with a little reference to the actual world. Yes, but also no. Like, I fucking hate when people start telling me what logic is. You don't like, the people who think they know what logic is, they don't fucking know what logic is. Like, I was talking to a proper logician, a guy who's like world famous in logic. And he's like, the idea that people have any idea what like I do in logic, they don't know. It's like it's divorced. He can make a logic that does anything he wants it to. It's all a question of how you set up formal systems. He can make the logic do anything. It has nothing to do with what like the normal conception of logic, which usually just means what the fuck people want it to say. They say something is logical because it follows. No, you think it follows. Why does it follow is the study of logic, not because you think it does. So this is the problem. There's yeah, exactly, Iris. There's expertise. And so it's like, if you want to talk about formal logic, it is divorced from actuality. That's the fact of the matter. If you're talking about what like people consider to be logic in the non-philosophical world, that's nice and it may be very important, but it's not formal logic. So I don't want to hear people being like, "Oh, this is formal logic." It ain't. It just ain't. It's not what it is. So it's like there's a reason why like there's a divorce there. Now again, the problem then is, well, is anything the formal logicians say of any worth to anybody except for academics? Maybe not, and maybe they're just jerking themselves off in that case. And that would be a fair criticism. But like, yes, it is divorced. Yes, the formal studies quite often are divorced from reality, and that is just how they are. But like, yeah. So it's like, yes, but then why you bother doing it? But because they are divorced from reality, or if you're going to be saying something about reality, then like that's fine, but it's not the same thing. Gotta be. So I get annoyed. It's like I do academic metaphysics, and I was telling somebody I did like metaphysics, logic, philosophy of science, theory of knowledge, and they heard metaphysics and they stopped listening to me because they thought I was playing with rocks. Like they thought I got like crystals and I was doing stuff, and so they stopped listening to me until the next time I saw them, and then they were discussing like, why are you talking to that guy? He's like playing with like crystals and shit. They were like, no, he's like an academic philosopher, like academic metaphysics. He thought like because he just stopped listening to me when I said metaphysics. So I was like, okay, and like that's like that happened. like that, like I said metaphysics, and they just tuned me out for the rest of the night. I was like, oh well. Uh-oh, what are you doing? What are your experiments? Oh dear. Ara says, I footnoted Charles Mills talking about this problem. Quote, a lot of philosophy is just white guys jerking off. That it is. Either philosophy is not about real issues in the first place, but about pseudo-problems, or when it is about real issues, the emphases are in the wrong places, or crucial facts are omitted, making the whole discussion pointless, or the abstractness is really a sham for what we all know but are not allowed to say out loud. There is something strange about spending a whole course describing the logic of different moral ideals, for example, without ever mentioning that all of them were systematically violated for blacks. Oh, shit. What did I miss? Okay. So it is not merely that the ideal was not always attained, but that more fundamentally, this was never actually the ideal in the first place. A lot of moral philosophy will then seem to be based on pretense. Okay, so he timed Lumpy. You got timed out. Okay, so Vipers used you for an experiment, Lumpy. And what's my favorite crystal? Crystal Delight. It's a very nice drink. Yeah, sorry, Lumpy. Vipers, you were guinea pigged. I should have a favorite crystal too. Like, that's a good question, and I should just have one ready to go. Mills admits it might be different in formal philosophy, but in ethics and politics, it seems like dealing with real people is important. Yes. So, like, if you are always talking about ethics and it doesn't apply to, like, reality, then you have a problem. If I'm talking about formal philosophy and it doesn't always apply to reality, not always a problem, because sometimes it applies to computer systems. So like I just said, our buddy, well, not really buddy, John Simmons, you want to know what he's now in charge of a social, like a giant, like computers and social policy thing out of Kansas, because he understands the philosophy of the technology and the logic behind this stuff. And so he's got himself a semi-nice gig going now, because he's like a philosopher of ethics and computer science. So it's like, that's actually good. So all that formal shit he was doing in the past actually does matter, but it wasn't divorced. It was divorced from reality until the reality caught up with the philosophy at this point. So, oh no. We lost a good message from Lumpy. That's sad. Lumpy's message, in fairness, there was a tangible benefit from consuming philosophy as a layman. Taking a step back from the weeds of the journal articles, there's progress being made. I evolved my personal values over the last years talking with you guys. See, yeah, we don't suck. Okay. Ara says, I actually is like a troll doll. You can swap the gems in his belly button and effects with magic powers I have. Yes, that is an accurate statement. And, yeah, like... So, like, the hair does go up. Like, we can do this. We control it. So, yeah. Yeah, I may have known that troll dolls had powers. So, yeah. So, basically, I'm a troll doll. So this side needs to go up a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so there we go. I feel bad I don't have a gem or something. I could have one on my desk as an example. Like, metaphysics, right here. Like, I have a quarter. These are my teaching examples. I have a pencil, I have a pen, and a quarter. These are the examples I've used in as philosophical examples. But yeah. Okay. Yeah, so this is like social psychology. This is where we're coming in. It's like we're coming in, what do people think about stuff, which is a social psychology thing, and then what do people talk about it, and then what actually do we use it in philosophy. Such a luxurious hair. I am le patate. I can't speak French. Yeah, so I'm a little jealous, as we say in French. Yeah. My dad had hair till the end of his life. His dad had some hair left over when he died. Yeah. So I hopefully have hair. I don't know what happened on my mom's side, because they died before my mom was, we didn't have much contact with them. So we'll see. But yeah, my uncle has most of his hair too. Okay, so the novelty might involve the methodologically self-conscious pursuit of such an approach. This, anyhow, is the side of experimental philosophy that I will be discussing. If the movement is to substantiate a claim to novel results of striking interest in philosophy, this work on intuitions and other work similarly dependent on surveys would seem to be particularly important. Yeah, because like people say, oh, this is how I feel about something, is my intuition. Who gives a shit what you feel? Like, maybe you're an idiot and you feel stupid things. So it's like, maybe it would be good to find out what most people feel and then be like, well, maybe that's something we should talk about because it matters to most people. And like the quote from Mills, if you are systematically excluding huge amounts of people in your ethics, maybe your ethics is crap. Yeah. Alright, Sosa's defense against experimentalist objections to armchair intuitions is anchored in the fact that verbal disagreement need not be substantive. This defense will be developed presently, but first, how should we conceive of intuitions? And this is the problem. People like to talk about intuitions, no one has a goddamn thing out of just like their opinions. A lot of times when they say intuitions, they just mean opinions, and you know, opinions are like assholes, everyone has them, and they all stink. Sosa continues, it is often claimed that analytic philosophy appeals to armchair intuitions in the service of conceptual analysis, but this is deplorably misleading. The use of intuitions in philosophy should not be tied exclusively to conceptual analysis. Who actually fucking made this claim? Who made this claim? No one actually says that we need intuitions for conceptual analysis. Who claimed this? He just says this. That's so weird. Why would you say that there's like something called conceptual analysis that needs intuitions? Who the fuck said that? I don't understand. Consider some main subjects of prominent debate. Utilitarian versus deontological theories in ethics, for example, or Rawls' theory of justice in social and political philosophy, or the externalism-internalism debate in epistemology, and many others could be cited to similar effect. These are not controversies about the conceptual analysis of some concept. They seem, moreover, to be disputes about something more objective than just a description or analysis of our individual or shared concepts of the relevant phenomena. Yet they have been properly conducted in terms of hypothetical examples and intuitions about these examples. The questions involved are about rightness or justice or epistemic justification. Some questions concern an ethical or epistemic subject matter and not just our corresponding concepts. I mean, yeah, if you're saying, well, what's right, or how do we know something, the like internalism, like you know it because you can reason about it, or is it true because it was found through some like, you know, proper means? Like the thermometer told you what the temperature is, and the thermometer is reliable, and so you have some external way of knowing what the temperature is because the thermometer told you. It's like, that seems like it's a good question. Or do you know because you have a reliable process in your brain and that's internal to you? So it's like, you can break this down. I hate the internal externalist crap in epistemology, but I figure most people might not know that. But you might know the utilitarian or like, you know, rule-based deontology in ethics. And that's a discussion to have. Where am I? Okay, there can be a subject matter beyond our conception of it, moreover, even if rightness, justice, and epistemic justification are not natural kinds, nor need they be socially constructed kinds either. Indeed, we can regard philosophical controversies as objective without ever going into the ontological status of the entities involved, if any. Mostly, we can conduct our controversies, for example, just in terms of where the truth lies with regard to them, leaving aside questions of objective ontology, or objectual ontology. Yeah. Paper works, but like I Googled it and then found it. So it's on the internet somewhere. If you put it through Google Scholar, you can find it. Prima facie, there is a role for intuition in simple arithmetic and, you see, I don't know what, simple arithmetic and geometry, moreover, but not only there. Just consider how extensively we rely on intuition. Take, for example, any two sufficiently different shapes that you perceive on a surface. Say the shapes of any two words. All right, I was going to go with like, you know, we've got different shapes. We got pencil and we've got quarter. See, they are useful demonstrating things. If they are words in a foreign language, you may not even have a good recognitional grasp, a good concept of any of those shapes. Yeah, like, so you can think of something in a, you know, a script you don't read. Like, I don't read Arabic, so I don't know exactly where the words begin and end sometimes. Like when they're all like put together, or German for that matter, because the Germans put all their words together. So you may Still, you may know perfectly well that they are different, and what you know is not just that the actual tokens are different. You also know that any word token so shaped would be differently shaped from any thus shaped. as you demonstrate the two shapes in turn. Yeah, so you don't have to know what the things are, you just have to know they're different. Or take any shape and any color, any shape and any sound, and so forth, and so on and so forth. Why deny ourselves a similar intuitive access to the simple facts involved in our hypothetical philosophical examples? That we enjoy such access would seem to be the default position, absent from some specific objection. Okay, so he's saying, look, we can tell things apart, and we can do that through intuition. Yeah. Telling things apart and then expanding from telling things apart is really hard. Just telling things apart, like, we can do that, but like different types of things, and once you get into different distinctions, that's actually going to be really tough. So he's starting from some real basic, you can tell apart different shapes. So this is more like a line, and this is more like a circle. You can tell the line apart from the circle. Yeah, but from there, what else do you have? You don't get a whole lot, really. So you got to be worried. Like, this may be one of these times where he's trying to get you to believe something, but he really didn't back it up. I don't know, but I'm just worried about it, because the fact that we can distinguish two different things is really minimal. All right, Sosa says, I apply a virtue epistemology to the specific case of a priori knowledge, and more specifically to foundational a priori knowledge, to an intuitive justification and knowledge. Traditionally, such intuitions have been understood in accordance with two prominent models. A, the perceptual eye of the mind model, and B, the Cartesian introspective model. Each of these models is subject to fatal objections, however, which prepares the way for my proposed competence-based account. On my proposal, to intuit that P is to be attracted to assent simply through entertaining that representational content. The intuition is rational if and only if it derives from a competence, and the content is explicitly or implicitly modal, that is, attributes necessity or possibility. This first approximation is then defended against the two main published lines of attack on intuitions, the calibration objection and the cultural divergence objection. Okay, so he went hardcore analytic right here. Basically, what I think he's doing is he's pulling the wool over our eyes at this point. He just went crazy analytic really fast, and I just don't think anything got said here. He's going to say he went from saying we can distinguish two things that are different to then saying virtue epistemology. This is a very fast shift from like this line to this. From we can know that two things are different to virtue epistemology in the course of a single line. I don't know what the hell he thinks he's doing, but, he's trying to pull it off. So let's find out. But, like, this is a non-trivial jump right here. Like, the fact that you have intuitive access to finding out that two things are separate to a whole virtue epistemology seems a little bit wild as far as where you're going from, like, where you start and where you're ending up. What do we got? Oh, screw you, Twitch. Twitch is sending me stuff. I thought I had like a whisper or something. It was just Twitch being stupid. But yeah, so just keep in mind, when you get confused in philosophy papers, it's because they're trying to do something. I got confused when I was reading this. I'm like, what the fuck is he doing? But if you're getting confused, it's because they're trying to like bite a lot off all at once, and chances are they bought a bit off more than they could chew. And so this is the question. The fact that you can move from like, you can distinguish two things that are different from each other to a virtue epistemology in one sentence, no. Be more careful. Okay. And he's going to go to something called competence, which again, who knows what he's going to define by competence. But yeah. All right, one might quite properly wonder why we should restrict ourselves to modal propositions, and there is no very deep reason. It's just that this seems to be the proper domain for philosophical uses of intuition. True contingent intuitions might also derive from a competence. For example, there is a taking experience at face value competence, whose resulting intuition would be of the form, if things appear thus and so, then they are thus and so. I would call these empirical intuitions, however, to be distinguished from the rational intuitions involved in abstract, a priori, armchair thought of the kind we do in philosophy. Yeah, so if you think like modal things like murder is wrong, that would be an intuition, and that's like a categorical statement. It's of necessity, and that's what he's talking about here, and that's fine. It might be objected that the proposed account is too externalist, but two sources of such worry need to be distinguished. One is the access worry and the other is the control worry, and the two are largely independent. These raise large and fascinating issues of internalism versus externalism. Here I can only gesture inadequately at my preferred stance. First, regarding access, we cannot well insist on armchair access to the justifying power of our sources, since their justifying power depends crucially on their reliability, and this is not knowable from the armchair for our competences generally. Yeah, so if you want to know why murder is wrong, you say, well, it is because that's how it is, and if you're looking for something out in the world for it, it's like you don't have access to that. And that's what he's saying regarding access. How do you know murder is wrong? How can you tell that intuition is correct or true? You know, whatever. But like, that's not the point here. And so he's hand waving this away. All right, so he says, this is not to deny that a source's justifying power is boosted, reaching a special level when we do have access to its reliability, or at least that when the source operates in combination with such awareness, we attain higher reflective level for the resulting beliefs. Yeah, so if you found out there's some reason in the world that murder is wrong, that would help it. Secondly, regarding control, we cannot well insist on total control. We must depend on favorable circumstances in all sorts of ways, and these are often relevantly beyond our control. We must depend on a kind of epistemic luck. Yes, you have to come upon these thoughts. You can't always just assume you know all the things all the time. That's fair too. If we insist that true knowledge requires armchair access to the reliability of our competences or total control regardless of our situation, the outcome is extreme skepticism, which I do not regard as a reductio exactly, though I do think it limits the interest of the notions of absolute knowledge thus induced. Yeah, see, if you can only know absolute things that you have complete access to, you're only going to know a few things, and it's going to be kind of not enough. Alright, continuing. When we rely on intuitions in philosophy, then, in my view, we manifest a competence that enables us to get it right on a certain subject matter by basing our beliefs on the sheer understanding of their contents. Okay, let me finish up the paragraph before getting angry. How might survey results create a problem for us? Suppose a subgroup clashes with another one on some supposed truth, and suppose they all ostensibly affirm as they do based on the sheer understanding of the content affirmed. I know it didn't make sense, Anne. That's the problem. That's the problem. It doesn't make sense. It's circular. Okay, but this is the problem. He defined competence and said that when we're competent, we get it right. And then now we're having an empirical disagreement about when you say you're competent and then people disagree when both sides are competent. That's all that happened here. It doesn't make sense. But yeah. So they both affirm it and they're both competent. So where's the competence thing? Competency. Okay, so broken up on the line where I couldn't spot it. So yeah, everyone's competent and then they all affirm it and then they disagree. So you're competent, you affirm it, and then half of them affirm P while the other half deny it. Next line. So this is what it is. Everyone says we're competent, and then half say yes, the other half say no. With everyone basing their respective attitudes on the sheer understanding of the representational content of whatever it is. However, obviously half of them are getting it right and half wrong. Of those who get it right now, how plausible can it be that their beliefs constitute or derive from rational intuition, from an attraction to a scent that manifests a real competence? See, yep, and see, now you've got this weasel word. This is a weasel word right here, real competence, all right? Who the fuck knows what real competence here is? You're just defining it as like whatever you want to be. And this is what happens. You say, well, it's true, or it's real, or this is like this is what's important. And this is just a weasel word because he wants to say, you know, well, when you get it right, then it's true. But like, that's just circular. Ugh. Not that it is logically incoherent to maintain exactly that. Yeah, it's circular. It's not logically incoherent. That's right. Of course it's true. Frank says, choosing a statement with half people on each side is a huge selection issue. Well, this is a hypothetical example here, Frank. He's imagining where everyone claims to be competent, and then it's basically broken up into, like, even if it's not, like, completely equal, like, reasonably equal stuff. So, you don't need to, yeah, no true Scotsman, fair, Tindarios. You can just imagine that everyone claims to be competent, and then there are significant subpopulations that disagree about the way it is. And it's like, well, okay, but then what do you mean by competence and who's really competent? Maybe the minority is in the right in this case. So it doesn't need to be split up half and half. He was doing that for convenience sake to make it look more worse than it is. But you can still do this even if it isn't broken up half and half, because as long as it's a significant population, you have to say, well, why did they have the disagreement? Frank says, but it doesn't disprove competence because the hypothetical is from selection of many questions, and competence could generally work across all questions. Yeah, but again, real competence, and it's like, well, what is it then? So it's like, how do you then judge what is really competent? Because you can't look at the results. The results are the result of competence, not it's telling you what the competence is. So in some sense, you're exactly right. It doesn't disprove competence. This is going the wrong way. And that's why Tyndareus called it no true Scotsman, is because there's a form of the no true Scotsman fallacy. You're saying, well, this isn't real. It's not the true Scotsman. And that's what it is. So, do we have any Scottish people here? I always wondered how the actual Scots feel about the thing called Scotsman. The no true Scotsman. Like the true Scotsman doesn't actually like the true Scotsman. All right. Yeah, but how plausible can it be absent some theory of error that will explain why so many are going wrong when we are getting it right? Yeah, see, it doesn't have to be equal. It's just so many. That's all it is. Yeah. But yeah. See, Sosa's not stupid. He knew this was coming. Yeah. It's not so many. But that's all. All he needs is so many. I mean, he only needs some. But like, it doesn't. Again, it's he's got the argument reversed. Like, you're assuming there is some sort of competence that is correct, but you can't define it because, again, he's defined it in the abstract, not in the realistic, but then you're saying, well, these people are wrong, but then there's no way to judge who's right and who's wrong. So, he says, unless we can cite something different in the conditions or in the constitution of the misled, doubt will surely cloud the claim to competence by those who hypothesize are getting it right. Yeah, see, then you can't claim who actually is competent anymore. But see, this is all he needs for his argument here, Frank. I mean, if I'm getting what you're saying wrong, let me know. I hope I'm not getting you wrong. I'm just trying to say, look, he doesn't actually need it to be half and half. He was doing that for convenience. Because it's a little bit more complicated if you do it not half and half. But the results will be, I think, the same. Okay, continuing. If there is a large disagreement in color judgments within a certain population, how can we sustain the claim to be competence by those whose excellent color vision guides them systematically to the truth? Presumably, we need to explain the error of the others by appeal to some defect in their lighting conditions or in the color vision, something wrong in their rods and cones or the like. Frank says, I think you basically get me, and there's a good chance I'm missing something. Yeah, it's like, don't focus on the, just say, look, just go with, like, you know, there's a significant group of the population that are disagreeing. Yeah. Well, just mean getting one thing wrong doesn't mean the claim to competence is clouded. The problem is, how do you judge at that point if you have defined everyone who claims to be competent to be competent? How do you actually judge at that point? Because everyone claims to be competent and you're at an impasse. And so that's the thing. Getting one thing wrong doesn't change competence, but when you're getting groups of people and they are completely at odds and you have no way to judge, then that's the claim about clouding what actually counts to be competent. Because there's no like universal agreement on the matter, or not even close to, not universal, but there's not like an obviously right group, because like there's large populations that disagree. So you need something like something's wrong with the vision or something. Even if we reject the perceptual model of intuition, so long as we still appeal to competence, we need something analogous to the error theory that protects our color vision from the disagreement of the colorblind and those who are misled by bad light. We need an error theory that attributes the error of those who disagree with us to bad constitution, blindness, or to a bad situation, bad light. Yeah, see, and now he's just saying, well, they're all wrong, the people who are disagree with the people who are competent. So this is defining himself out of the problem. He's calling it error theory. He's just saying, well, they're in error, basically. They're in the margins. That would seem to be so, he says. Moreover, regardless of whether the subject matter is fully objective, as perhaps with shape perception, or quasi-objective and reaction dependent, as perhaps with color perception or with socially constructed phenomena. Viper says, I just up this button so I can press it to remind you of all, that you are a competent moderator. Oh, so that is a stock phrase now, and it's just going to be popping up on all of our streams where you are around. Thank you, Vipers. I appreciate the reminder that you are a competent moderator. But then we have to ask, do you actually know what it means to be competent? And that's the point of this paper, or part of it. Okay, so there will definitely be a prima facie problem for the appeal to intuitions in philosophy if surveys show that there is extensive enough disagreement on the subject matter supposedly open to intuitive access. The bearing of these surveys on traditional philosophical issues is questionable, however, because the experimental results really concern, in the first instance, only people's responses to certain words. But verbal disagreement need not reveal any substantive, real disagreement if ambiguity and context might account for the verbal divergence. Yes, you do. Very good. And you can make an announcement. You should pin that, you know. Why don't you make it pinned? That would be even better. You can pin that you are a competent moderator. That would make you look really not petty at all. Frank says, I used to have the extreme view that Vipers was an incompetent moderator, but now my view has been moderated. And you know how I now pick my moderators. Okay. Yeah, so like people might say they disagree, but then if you drill down, like it's just a verbal disagreement, that's fair. But like I don't think that's getting him what he wants here, but we'll see. If today I say Mary went to the bank yesterday and tomorrow you say Mary did not go to the bank yesterday, we need not disagree given ambiguity and contextual variation. Yeah, because your yesterdays are different days when you're talking on different days. The experimentalists have not yet done enough to show that they have crossed the gaps created by such potential differences in meaning and context so as to show that supposedly common sense intuitive belief is really not as widely shared as philosophers have assumed it to be, nor has it been shown beyond reasonable doubt that there really are philosophically important disagreements rooted in cultural or socioeconomic differences, or so he's argued elsewhere. Corpulent moderator, yes. Oh no, competent moderator, yeah. Of course, not corpulent. It's good, Tindarios. Within the movement itself, one finds a growing recognition that the supposed intuitive disagreements may only be verbal. Thus, a recent paper by Sean Nichols and Joseph Ulatowski contained the following proposal. Quote, our hypothesis is that intellectual exhibits interpretive What? Let me start that again. Our hypothesis is that intentional exhibits interpretive diversity, that is, it admits of different interpretations. Part of the population, when given certain sorts of cases, interpret intentional one way, and part of the population interpret it another way. On one interpretation, both cases are intentional, and on another interpretation, neither is. In linguistics and philosophy of language, there are several ways that a term can admit of different interpretations. The term might be ambiguous, polysemous, or exhibit certain forms of semantic underspecification. We mean for the interpretive diversity hypothesis to be neutral about which form of interpretive diversity holds for intentional. Corpulent, huh? I might remind you that I have ban and timeout mapped to buttons now. Yeah. Well, Vipers, how do you actually get the username into the button is the question. That's always been a problem. If you're going to have buttons for that thing, how do you actually map it to specific users? I mean, maybe you have I don't know. But that's always a hassle. Anyway. All right. Sosa says, to the extent that experimental philosophy adopts this way of accounting for diversity of verbal intuitive responses, it will avoid substantive clashes in favor of merely verbal disagreements. But once such disagreements are seen to be verbal, the supposed problem for philosophical intuition evaporates. Frank says the username is irrelevant to the competence of the banning. That's true. You are correct. The defense of philosophy... he's going for the shotgun approach, not the sniper. He's hitting anyone. Tindarios is angry. Alright. The defense of philosophical intuition by appeal to merely verbal disagreement may be rejected because the implied failures of communication would threaten to make intuition reports useless for joint philosophical theorizing. Yeah, I mean, if you're saying everything is just a philosophical confusion, that's not true. We actually have substantive disagreements sometimes. Like, some people are like, yeah, I was just talking to somebody, and they were like, it's kind of okay sometimes to let like important people slide on stuff because they're important people, and we wouldn't get as much done without them. And then I was like, but what about the crappy people who do bad things? And then you realize they're terrible people, and you don't really want them in charge anyway. It's like you have the deontologists say, no, that's wrong, like full stop, and other people say, nah, let slide. It's utilitarian consequentialism. It's okay. So it's like, yeah. Viper says, I could never get that to work, but you can leave it blank, and then it goes into another screen where the button shows all the active users, and you can press the one you want to nuke. Yeah, I guess that's true. So that would work on a stream of sufficiently small size. Oh yeah, maybe there's some other way to do it. Like recent chatters have that, but like that's a hassle. I've seen people worry about making stream decks like this before, where they're trying to target specific users in chat. And so it's like maybe you could have like just like if you were catching recent chatters, then you could have a smaller list of stuff like that. So it might be feasible, but it's a pain in the ass. That's why it doesn't get done. That's why you use BTTV and stuff, so you can just like click on the username and like right click and just get to the ban or whatever. So that works. People, and I hate about the inside baseball, but people do not realize how like difficult streaming can get, or like how complicated it can get at times. It's like like all this like little stuff is hard. Can you mod me just so Vipers can't ban me? Yes, I could. But will I? No. That's not how I choose my mods. You want to know how I chose Vipers? Vipers said in someone else's channel, no one in their right mind would make me a mod. There you go. And that's how Vipers got to be mod. Reethia says, what do the ancients say about boundaries? I bet Marcus has shit to say about this. Yeah, that's a good question. You got different things based on position. So like if you had a position in society, you got the things, like give unto Caesar all that's Caesar's. So it's like Caesar had everything. But like, if you had certain positions in the society, you had rights to that stuff, like certain like respect or whatever. And so it's like there were definitely different ways of viewing what you had access to and like the boundaries and what you were allowed to do. Like you have positions, like if you're a citizen, you have certain rights. If you are not a citizen, you don't have the rights of the citizen. So it's like, yeah. Anne says, and you want us to trust your decision-making abilities? I never asked for that. Never asked for you said to trust my things. So what are you going to do? I don't know. I actually haven't heard that many complaints about my Viper being a mod. Like, y'all be like, oh yeah, we want you to trust us. Like, yeah. What actually has Viper done except for, ban Lumpy today? I mean, what mistakes has Viper's made except for screw with Lumpy? Like, how dare you? It was for science, I know. You didn't understand a single bit of what I just said? Well, in ancient times, I was just saying, look, if you don't even need to go ancient times. As a citizen, you have different rights and responsibilities, and you get different things. And so I was like, they have different ideas. Like we have like laws and stuff. Well, they had like different like positions in society and things like that. I don't know why. He didn't ban Lumpy. He timed him out mistakenly, I think, or no, as an experiment. Don't be beating up on Vipers. He didn't do anything wrong. But yeah, I don't know. You actually, Reethius, unfortunately, you have to ask Aris more than I do. And also, my brain is getting fried at this point. I'm getting close to 3 hours, and I'm only halfway through this paper. And so I'm going to start losing it very soon. Just how it goes. Yeah, you'll have barbecues. Nice. We like barbecue. Exactly. Vipers, let's... There we go. Exactly. So yeah, so where were we? Okay, yeah. There's no real threat in saying this sort of thing. If like people just have verbal disagreements, but of course there's real disagreements. The appeal to divergences of interpretation is a defensive move made against those who claim that there is serious disagreement in supposed intuitions. It is only against such a claim of disagreement that we must appeal to verbal divergence. But any such claim need be taken seriously only when adequately backed by evidence. Yeah, like you have to actually disagree about stuff. But oh yeah. Back to the Stream Deck stuff. It's a pain in the butt. And this is surely a matter to be taken up case by case. Among possible sources of such attention-demanding evidence, two stand out. First, the evidence might be gathered empirically through surveys. Secondly, the evidence might be internal to our field, owed to a dialectic with fellow philosophers, where we seem to disagree persistently, for example, on what to think about various hypothetical cases. One attractive option, once we have reached that stage, having exhausted other options, would be to consider whether we may be interpreting our terms somewhat differently. Yeah, no, it's like there's disagreements in philosophy about philosophical topics like in academia, and then there's disagreements out in the world with other people disagreeing. That does happen. Consider a further case study of how an apparent clash of intuitions can turn out to be only verbal. We turn to a recent paper by Joshua Knobe and Sean Nichols about the bearing intuitions on the problematic of free will and determinism. In their view, intuitions relevant to this problematic are heavily influenced by affect. Here is a brief description of the study, its results, and the morals drawn. Is this a link or is right here? Okay, he's going to go into it. First, the distinction between a fully determinist universe D and an indeterminist universe I is presented to the experimental subjects, 90% of whom report that our own universe is more like I than D. Now for the shocking results. When subjects are asked the abstract question of whether agents in D are fully morally responsible, 86 say they are not. No agent can be fully morally responsible for doing what he is fully determined to do. However, when a dastardly deed is attributed to a wealth of detail to a particular agent in D, and those same subjects are asked whether the agent is then fully responsible, 72% report the view that he is. Yeah. Alright, so we're all, okay. You're all chatting between yourselves. Okie dokie. So Knobe and Nichols consider various ways to account for this amazing divergence. In the end, they find it most plausible to think that some performance error is responsible. Affect, they suggest, degrades intellectual performance in general, whether the relevant competence be memory, perception, inference, etc. You said Windows XP would be better than Windows 95? Oh dear. Getting to like old Windows arguments now? Yeah. Of course, that explanation will leave intuition affected as lightly as our perception, memory, and inference, unless some further relevant difference can be specified. Yeah, so what he's saying is they hand-waved it away. He was saying that if they disagreed about, like, who was responsible or not, then they're just saying, well, it's just the way, you know, there's some, like, some deficiency about the people's reasoning. And that's it. And so there's still a disagreement. And when they fuck it up, it's because it's not just a verbal disagreement. It's there's some sort of acrasia or a weakness in their thing. In any case, there's an alternative explanation that will cast no effect involving doubt on the intuitions at play. This other possibility came to mind on reading their paper and was soon confirmed in the article on moral responsibility in the SCP, where we are told that at least two different senses of moral responsibility have emerged. The attributability sense and the accountability sense. On the attributability view, to say that S is responsible for action A is to say that A is attributable to S on his own doing, and we are told in the article as an action that reveals something about S's character. On the accountability view is to say that S is responsible for action A is to say that S is properly held accountable for or responsible for A in such a way that various good or bad things may be visited upon S for doing A. Okay, so one's telling you about their constitution, and one's telling you what you can hold them responsible for. So yeah, in a determinist universe, it is part of their constitution, not their fault though. But if you're saying, on the other hand, what they're responsible for, then you have to say that they are somehow at fault for the way that they are. So here again, quite possibly, the striking divergence reported is explicable, mainly if not entirely through verbal divergence. Now here's a problem. Philosophers are very clever. They can always do this sort of shit. They can always come up with like a law versus a constitutive part of the body, like of the subject. And either way, like this is one of these funny things. You can actually always do this. You can always say, well, it was inherent, or you could say it was the universe. And there's always just like this sort of like shift you can do. This is one of the very slippery metaphysical things. And the fact that he's doing this right here, and he's a real smart guy. So I wonder if he's doing this on purpose. Maybe not, but like usually you can always shift between some sort of constitutive explanation and a causal explanation, and that's what's going on here. Where they is this the constitutive explanation? I'm out of water, Tindarios. I drank it all, but I can stretch. You can always explain stuff by saying, well, this is how they were made up, and then you can blame the universe for that. Or you can say, well, this is like what they did, and then you can say it was responsible, like the causal explanation. Well, they were vicious, and we can blame them for that. And you can always come up with multiple explanations for things. And so I don't think this gets out of his problem, because you can always do this. And so this is a metaphysical dodge, in my opinion here. So even though he's saying, like, look, you can reduce this to verbal disagreement, well, you can always do this because it's a metaphysical way out. It's a hard argument, actually, but still. So he continues, indeed, we may plausibly go beyond the explanation suggested in the Stanford Encyclopedia by suggesting that in common parlance, accountability need not be tied to manifestations of character. Those attracted to agent causation, including philosophers such as Thomas Reid, Roderick Chisholm, would not make that linkage. So there is a notion of attributability, responsibility that is inherently incompatibilist in requiring only that the agent have caused his action, free of antecedent determinants, free even of determination by his or her own character. Yeah, so this is the problem. You've got he recognizes that you can always have two different kinds of explanations, but then he's not but then he's always keeping them separate. He's not seeing this as a metaphysical problem. He's saying, well, you can always say, well, look, it's a verbal disagreement. That's unfair because it's a metaphysical disagreement in the way you're giving explanations. And are people always doing that? You have to account for this. Okay, so if so, we may then find different interpretations at work in the verbal disagreement between the affected intuitors who react to the specific description of the dastardly deed, and the cold theoretical intuitors who respond to the abstract question of whether an agent can be responsible in a deterministic universe. Of course, it remains to be seen why the one concept is more readily engaged by the affect elicited with the specific case, and the other more readily by cold reasoning about the abstract issue, but pessimism about the explaining this would seem premature. Yeah, so you've got two different classes of people who like causal explanations, people who like constitutive explanations about like how people are made up. Then you're just going to have a disagreement on how to explain things. Let us turn to a further line of experiment-based objection against philosophical intuition, which appears in a recent paper by Stacy Swain, Joshua Alexander, and John M. Weinberg, as follows. Quote, we follow that intuitions in response to Keith Lehrer's true temp case vary according to whether and what other thought experiments are considered first. So there's a framing effect here. Our results show that 1. Willingness to attribute knowledge in the true temp case increases after being presented with a clear case of non-knowledge, and 2. Willingness to attribute knowledge in the true temp case decreases after being presented with a clear case of knowledge. We contend that this instability undermines the supposed evidential status of these intuitions. True temp is when someone has a thermometer built into their brain, so they always know what temperature it is. So it's like if you set up a case where you're talking about someone with a temperature monitor in their brain, in one way they believe one thing and another way another thing. That's just true temp. Okay, so Sosa says, well, maybe to some extent, but surely the effects of priming, framing, and other such contextual factors will affect the epistemic status of intuition in general only in the sort of way that they affect the epistemic status of perceptual observation in general. One would think that the ways of preserving the epistemic importance of perception in the face of such effects on perceptual judgment would be analogously available for the preservation of the epistemic importance of intuition in the face of such effects on intuitive judgment. Yeah, so if you frame something a certain way, or you have certain like colored lights, then that's what affects your judgments, because that's what you like. Your eyes are affected by the color of light, and then the framing effect is affecting what you think about certain ideas. The upshot is that we have to be careful in how we use intuition, not that intuition is useless. It is, of course, helpful to be shown how intuition can go astray in unfavorable conditions, just as perception can go similarly astray. But the important question is untouched. Can intuition enjoy relative to philosophy an evidential status analogous to that enjoyed by perceptual relative to empirical science? Yeah, so can we just use intuitions like we see stuff? We turn finally to a recent line of attack on philosophical intuition, one also in line with experimental philosophy movement. According to a recent book by Michael Bishop and J.D. Trout, epistemology should look beyond its navel and adopt a more worthy project of developing prescriptions that will have some use in the real world. By contrast, the methods of standard analytic epistemology are suited to the task of providing an account of the considered epistemic judgments of mostly well-off Westerners with PhDs in philosophy. And this is one of the things that Aris brought up earlier. Like, yes, you're talking about, white guys in the West, or those are the ones talking about philosophy, and those are not really the majority of humans. Normative disciplines concerned with the prescription and evaluation have a theoretical side and a more applied side. The latter we might call casuistry in a broad sense. We are familiar with the casuistry of advice columnists, priests, parents, therapists, and friends tailored to a specific individual cases, and we also know the more general policy-oriented casuistry of applied ethics, a large and thriving subdiscipline. Insofar as there is such a thing as applied epistemology, I suppose it is to be found largely, though not exclusively, in the similarly large and active field of critical reasoning. Yeah, I mean, this makes sense. So you're going to actually be talking about stuff in certain ways, and this is going to be separate from academia. It may be objected that even if intuition is defensible abstractly as a possible source of normative knowledge, its role in epistemic casuistry will be small by comparison with our knowledge of the relevant scientific facts about our intellectual equipment and its social and physical setting, about its reliability, and about reliability of various information gathering tools. That may or may not be so. Yeah, I mean, like, what are we actually getting from our everyday experience with, like, knowledge? I mean, today at work, I found out that someone broke up with their husband. And they both work in where I work. And they weren't working together, but they both work, like in my workplace. And I had been in the same room with them the other day, and they didn't look at each other, and it was weird because they were married. And apparently something went very bad in the last, like, month or two. And, oh man. So I was like looking at it, it's like, and this is one of these like practical applied ethics. I'm like, I knew there were problems. I didn't know it was to the fact that now they are broken up. Someone said that later. So I was like, oh man. But like information gathering methods. How do you walk right by someone you're married to without even like glancing at each other? Very, like one person's looking this way and one person just went right by. And they knew they were in the room. It wasn't like, it's not that big of a room that they were walking by. So it was like, But like, yeah, so this is the thing. Like, applied ethics is applied epistemology. What did I know about their relationship yesterday when that happened, and then I got confirmed today? Yeah, so there's plenty of things to be known. So is that like an intuition? Yeah, that's not intuition. That's like, that's this sort of like everyday stuff. So it's like, what's Sosa saying here? Like its role, like the abstract stuff's role in the everyday knowledge is going to be small. Like it won't matter. It won't matter the abstract stuff. So yeah, and Aaron says nothing, and basically small to nothing. So Sosa says, I find it difficult to assess such size of role, especially since the aspects for epistemic casuistry are so unclear, and I mean epistemic casuistry as a discipline with generally applicable rules. Of course, we know a lot about reliable methods, for example, how to determine a huge variety of facts through the use of corresponding variety of instruments. Good night, Lumpy. Thank you for being here. No, it's cool. You can always... This is philosophy. It is all off-topic ramblings. Yeah. So, yeah, and I hope you get good sleeps, and tomorrow is less stressful with people, minding their own fucking business and not dumping it on you. Yeah, I do have to appreciate they did not dump their problems on me. They've had their problems because, like, I work in some sense with both of them. I just see the wife or the ex-wife, I guess, now. Yeah. Oh, good. Hopefully it does what you need it to do. I see the wife more than I see the husband, but I also see him. Yeah. Okay, and we also know how to use library sources, which newspapers trust, which statistical methods are reliable, etc. But there is really no discernible unified discipline there. Yeah, I mean, how do you practically go about figuring stuff out? Is there a unified discipline? No, that's fair. Such casuistry would encompass all the manuals for all the various instruments and how to read all the various gauges for one thing, and would also include the variegated practical lore on how to tell what's what and on what basis, the lore of navigation, jungle guidance, farming tips, and so forth. That is all, of course, extremely useful, but is no part of the traditional problematic of epistemology, nor is there any reason to replace either of epistemic casuistry or traditional epistemology with other. Each has its own time and place. See, no, this is the problem. Traditional epistemology is crap. And so the idea that, like, this is the apologetics for the old white man philosophy right here. And this is, again, Aris brought this up, and from Charles Mills, this is the crap. He's saying, well, we still like our academic philosophy. It's still good, of course. Each has its own time and place. Yeah, except yours sucks and like everyone else has to make do because you've been off like jerking off in the corner with your epistemology for so long. And that's the problem. Like this is just all apologetics here. Like, yeah, what does not formal epistemology. Formal epistemology technically is useful in database theory and like other stuff like that with large language models. That's actually a lot of how do you generate knowledge using formal stuff. But like technical epistemology, like the analytic epistemology, yeah, that most of that's crap. So like, yeah. Okay. What do new solutions to the get your problem do? Exactly. They do nothing. They do nothing. The Gettier problem needs to be taken out back and shot and just forgotten about, like buried and shot and buried. So this traditional epistemology just needs to go. This is the problem. And so it's like he's apologizing, but he's just being the old white man apologizing for being an old white man. It's like, this is what we do. Don't you understand the value? Yeah, I understand the value. It sucks. Simple. Okay, traditional epistemology enjoys the coherence provided by its unified set of central questions concerning the nature, conditions, and extent of knowledge and justification. See this? Who gives a fuck? Like, seriously. Like, see, this is the problem. He's like trying to justify it and he's making it sound worse. Like, oh, you have some unified thing of like stuff that does not matter. Some may regard such questions with distaste. No, I don't regard such questions with distaste. I regard your apologetics of this shit with distaste. I mean, the traditional questions are interesting. The fact that you think they're useful is bad. All right. So it says, but Philistinism is not to be feared by a discipline that has attracted unexcelled minds over the course of millennia and in cultures as diverse as those of Buddhist India, classical Greece, and many others. See, this is hand waving, saying, oh, but like smart people like it, and the minds that are worthy of it look to it. Fuck you. In any case, even if the role of intuition in epistemic casuistry is small, I fail to see an objection here. Our question has been whether intuition can be understood clearly and defended adequately as a source of foundational a priori justification. Once that is accomplished, our task is complete, especially if intuition's role in epistemic casuistry is indispensable no matter how large or small. Yeah, so again, he's just saying, but like if we find some use for it, then it's good, right? Right? It's good because it just has to be defended adequately. That's all it has to be, whatever that means. God damn it. Traditional epistemologists. Nevertheless, okay. Fine. Moving on, thankfully. Nevertheless, Bishop and Trout pressed their case against the theoretical side of SAE as follows. As we have argued, when it comes to epistemic justifications, the theories of SAE define what we do, not what we must or ought to. They merely tell us how we do make epistemic judgments, and by we mean the tiny fraction of the world's population who has studied SAE. The proponents of SAE is replacing normative questions about how to evaluate reason and belief with descriptive questions about how proponents of SAE evaluate reason and belief. End quote. But this misconstrues the ways, what is this, like experimental philosophy or something? I don't know. What is SAE? This is the first time he said SAE. That's annoying. Not sure. So it's against SAE, whatever it is. but this misconstrues the way intuition is supposed to function in epistemology and in philosophy more generally, which is by analogy the only way observation is supposed to function in empirical science. Yeah, you're supposed to have like these ideas and then they come to you and like you see things out in the world, which is crap. Like, I don't understand that. Like, you just see the epistemology? Really? Is that how it works? Empirical theories are required to accord well enough with the deliverances of scientific observation. Does empirical inquiry merely tell us how we do make empirical observations? And by we, I mean only the tiny fraction of the world's population who studied empirical science. Is the proponent of the empirical science replacing questions about the tides, the circulation of the blood, the movements of the plants, and so on with questions about how proponents of empirical science make certain observations? That implied parity is supposed to bring out the misconstrual that I find in Bishop and Trout. Intuitions are supposed to function like observations. The data for empirical science includes not just our claims about the observations of a few specialists. This set of empirical data includes also the claims about the subject matter of the specialist fields of study, about the truths concerning the nature truths concerning natural phenomena under study. Similarly, philosophical data would include not just claims about the intuitions shared by some few specialists. Also prominently included would be claims about the subject matter of the philosopher's field of study, including evaluative and normative truths of epistemology, for example. Perhaps there is some crucial difference between natural phenomena and evaluative phenomena that rule out such an analogy. Perhaps there are no normative truths, for example, by contrast with the evident availability of empirical truths. But if this is the real issue, then we need to consider whether in principle there could or could not be the truths that there seem intuitively, commonsensically to be. Again, you were just claiming that there are fucking intuitions and repeating this over and over and over. God damn it. Sosa continues, and how could we possibly approach such a question except philosophically through the sort of reflection plus dialectic that depends crucially on philosophical intuition? Even if it turns out that there is such a fundamental semantic divergence between empirical and normative subject matter, finally a relevant analogy between observation and intuition might still survive such semantic divergence. This too would need to be debated philosophically. Progress on such issues of metaphilosophy depends thus on progress within philosophy. Okay, a lot of big words on this paper, and I don't think a whole lot got said, but basically this was defending the traditional view of philosophy, saying, hey, we've got intuitions, and even if we look at the empirics, you still need people who say, look, we have these beliefs, this is what we feel about stuff, and this is like, from the history of philosophy, this is what I feel, and like, this is what I intuit. Took a lot of fucking words to say that. That the history of philosophy gives you a perspective on stuff and you're going to call that your intuition or whatever it is. Oh my God. Oh my God. So this is the thing. You went up here. Sorry, I'm like angry at this point. Epistemology pisses me off. You come up here and you say, look, you can distinguish things like out in the world, and then you get like a feel for it, and that's how you know shit. It's like, okay, that's your intuitions. And then the experimentalists will say, well, let's go check to make sure that makes sense. Well, he says, no. I have good intuitions because I've done all this work, and there's a place for that. It's like, no shit, Sherlock. Okay. Like, no shit, Sherlock. Okay, but let's review it now. Sorry, me being angry. Everyone in chat, please give a review. I know I'm biasing. I'm giving a framing effect now by biasing all of your things by saying I did not like where this went. That does not mean it wasn't good philosophy. I quite often disagree with things that are good philosophy. And, just because I not turd. You see, that's the thing. It wasn't really... Yeah, nog turd. I was going to say not turd. Really? No, it was kind of... This is the definition of... You see, you can like it, but I think what happens, it was more shiny than anything else. This was just a defense, and Aris picked it out early, of, old white guy, not really old white guy, is just a defense of the tradition. That's what this came out. This is a defense of the tradition against the new kid in town, and I don't even like experimental philosophy. Exactly, it looks so shiny to Darius. So yeah, I'm going to have to give it a nog turd too. That doesn't mean it was bad philosophy, it just means it was very shiny, and it didn't amount to much, but that doesn't mean it didn't have some fun ideas, and it might even be worth reading. Like, the last one, I didn't give a turd. That was the grapes. It kind of promised a lot, but didn't really go anywhere. This one, like, argued fancy, but it was still shit. You know, this one's much fancier in the argument. Exactly. This is the problem here. Where was that? This was the jump where you're going right from, where was that other jump? Oh, it's right here. You went from being able to distinguish something in a fundamental level. You can see two different things that they are different. And then you're going to a full epistemology after that. And it's just like you want to make your intuitions are just like that. All of a sudden you see that two things are different and you want to argue it. You don't think you followed a lot of things? That's the problem. He was overly analytic philosophy, and it made it hard to understand what he was doing. I mean, Ernest is a professional, and he nailed him early on what was happening here, saying basically defending the tradition. I have stored past broadcasts in Twitch because I am not a partner. I do not get to store past broadcasts indefinitely. I get about 2 weeks to store them, and in that 2 weeks, I highlight them, so you only get the philosophy roulette portion, and I export it to YouTube. So they are all stored, and then within 2 weeks I export everything to YouTube, and then they get published eventually on YouTube, because I publish about 2 a week at this point. But so, you know, it takes a little bit of time for me to get to my stuff that happened here. That's why the create stream marker button doesn't work. No, I create stream markers. I make lots of stream markers. Yeah, navel gazing. That's good. So was this only for academics? You know, this is kind of, yeah. So this is going to get that. Yeah, I agree with that. That is only for academics, yeah. Because you had trouble following? That's fair. You know what? You are correct. I'm also going to give it one of those. The question is, like, is it worth reading again? No, I don't actually think this is going to get a vote nay from me. I mean, it was well done in some sense. If you understand what he was doing, it wasn't poorly done. I just don't think it's worth reading. Maybe it's dated. Like I was saying earlier, we read, I think, a much better takedown of experimental philosophy by John Simmons from like a year or two ago. This is from 2007, I think, written in 2006. That was basically early days still, like this 15 years ago, of something that came out of the late 90s. So this was still like, you know, sort of like the first, maybe second phase of experimental philosophy. We've had more time to reflect on it, and you know, maybe this is just dated at this point is what it is.